Hey, what is up, viewers and Israel fan Patrick Bryant's video, and this is episode 2 of Adventure Week of Barzeh, and today's verse comes out of Jeremiah 33, verse 3, and it reads, "Call to me, and I will answer you, and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know." And that's what that verse means. So, this morning it's time for our church recap, and we're going to start in the book of Genesis. In Genesis 1, this was a part of a sermon I watched last night. This was Glenn preaching. Jeremiah 1, or not Jeremiah 1, Genesis 1, starting in verse 9, it reads, "And God said, Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear. And it was so." In verse 10, God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. In verse 31, here's what he says. It reads, "God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day." That's all for the verse portion of that sermon. And now we're going to go to the book of Daniel. And this is the start of Rob's sermon from yesterday. And in Daniel 1, that's where we're going to start. This is the story of basically Daniel's training in Babylon. In verse 4, here's what it says. It reads, "Young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians." In verse 5, here's what it says. "The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they were to enter the king's service." In verse 7, it reads, "The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belshazzar. To Hananiah, Shadrach. To Mishael, Meshach. And to Azariah, Abednego." So basically what's happening is, these guys, they had their names changed whenever they were in Babylon. Daniel wasn't Daniel anymore. He was Belshazzar. Hananiah is not Hananiah anymore. He is Shadrach. And Michelle is not Michelle. She is Meshach. And Azariah is not Azariah anymore. He is Abednego. So there's these changes. This change where Daniel and the three other people, they had their names changed. Now I don't know why they decided to change their names. There was nothing wrong with it. There was nothing wrong with their names, but you know, I'm not gonna judge. But verse 8 says, "But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way." Now, God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. But the official told Daniel, "I am afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age?" In verse, there's more. The king would then have my head because of you." That was from Daniel. Also, verse 17 of Daniel 1 reads, "To these 4 young men God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds." Now we're going to skip over to Daniel 3. This is a familiar passage if you guys have ever read this story. This is the story of the image of gold and also the blazing furnace. We're going to start in verse 11 of chapter 3, and this is where the whole blazing furnace story starts. Not really, but verse 11 says, basically what has to be done in Babylon. Basically, they said there's a thing you have to do. So in verse 10, it reads, "Your Majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the instruments, including the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipe, and all kinds of music, they must fall down and worship the image of gold, which I think is a bunch of baloney. In verse 11, so he just told them what you have to, whenever the music starts, you have to bow down to this image of gold. In verse 11, here's the crazy part. And that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. Verse 14 is where things really heat up. Here's what it says. And Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my God or worship the image of gold I have set up?" So basically what happened was Nebuchadnezzar is asking this question because while the rest of the people were bowing down and worshiping this image of gold, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they didn't even move a single muscle. They didn't do it. And now Nebuchadnezzar is not happy. He's pretty ticked off with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego with this whole problem. Verse 15 is where things really heat up. It reads, "Now when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand." Verse 16 is where things really get interesting. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him. Here's what they say. "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter." Verse 17. "If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand." Verse 18. "But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Now we're going to skip down to verse 24. It reads, Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" So these people, they think they just threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the blazing furnace. But now something fishy starts going on. At least according to King Nebuchadnezzar. He asked his people, weren't there 3 men that we tied and threw into the blazing furnace? And they replied, "Certainly, your majesty." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed." And here's what's really interesting. "And the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Verse 26, it reads, "Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, 'Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here.'" And finally, verse 28. This gets even better. Here's what it says. It reads, "Then Nebuchadnezzar said, 'Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God.'" So after this whole fiasco with Nebuchadnezzar, complaining and asking Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, why didn't you bow down when the music played to serve my God, the image of gold? And now Nebuchadnezzar turns from a ticked off person to a person that's giving Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego a lot of credit. It was a surprise that they didn't even get burned. It was actually hot in that burning furnace. I'm not sure what verse, but yeah, it was a surprise. It was a surprise that Nebuchadnezzar turned from a person that was angry and was giving them a punishment of being thrown into the fiery furnace to a kind person. Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This is a really cool story. Just some notes from this is, he is with us. Our nation needs needs to see a demonstration, not a protest or a riot. I don't know how Rob said it was some type of demonstration. I don't remember what Rob said. I know who I am. There is only one Lord, and you do not change. God does not change. And before I end this video, you guys, I'm just gonna leave you with a verse. I have something I want to read to you guys, but before I do that, I just want to leave you with a verse today. And the verse today, it's coming out of Matthew 5:9, and it reads, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." And that's gonna do it for the video. But wait, there's more. So today is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and I just want to leave you today with a quote. So for one of our bridge for Bridge Project the 1 year, the theme of it was justice, and Micah 6:8 was the theme verse, I would like to say. And Micah 6:8, it basically says, "He has shown you, O mortal, what is good." And he gives, and God gives 3 commands. God gives us 3 things to do. He says, do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Well, I just want to leave you with a quote from Amos 5:24. And I don't know if Martin Luther King Jr. used this in a speech or not, but I was just looking for something to read you, since today's MLK Day, and this is what I want to leave you with today. Amos 5:24 says, "But let justice roll down as waters and righteousness as a mighty stream." And that's going to do it for today's video. So thanks for watching. Till next time we meet again, viewers, in every way, God's way is always the best way.